Hey guys, Tony with SeattleBoatDetailing.com. Today's project is I think it's a 44-foot sailboat. This is one we happen to do every year. So on this one, we are just doing some orbital polishing after having washed it and got it all prepped. This one has some light to moderate oxidation, and so we're just using our dual action polishers or orbitals to bring that out and put some protection back on the boat. Product we're using today is Meguiar's Flagship Premium, cut just a little bit with some diamond cut compound to help reduce that minor amount of oxidation that's in this boat. So as you can see right here on Jeremy's pad, it doesn't take a whole lot of product per step or per section that you do. It's just applying a little bit, working it in, and then coming back through and wiping it off. I think there was some water right there that he's wiping off first, caused by those fenders or bumpers, whatever you want to call them. So as we're doing this boat, you'll notice I'm using a different pad than Jeremy is. I've got a yellow one. It's a foam pad. Works pretty well on light to moderate oxidation with an orbital polisher in our mix. He's using a microfiber Griot's Garage pad that also works well in those cases. I'm using that yellow one up top because it's got kind of a contoured edge, and I can force it into some of these tight areas where that other pad just doesn't have that beveled edge to it, so it doesn't really do very good hitting those areas that are tight or kind of have two angles to them. So whenever we're waxing boats, it's really important to not hit things. On this sailboat, the things that I had to watch for is that wood right above my pad right there. As Jeremy was doing the hull, he had to be watching out for the wood right along the edge of the boat, of the hull where it meets the top side. And then, of course, the canvas there. So it's just important to always kind of watch where you're going, make sure you're not running into situations where you get there, you're hitting it, it's too late, you've already, got wax where it doesn't belong. So kind of thinking ahead and watching ahead as you're moving down the side of the work, super important. That canvas, I've got it all unsnapped, and basically I was guiding the buffer underneath it while using another hand to keep the canvas up and away from that buffer work that I was doing. I don't think I showed that in the video, but just an idea. Another thing we run into is sometimes on darker color boats or boats with black on them, like this window right behind where I'm buffing, if it becomes oxidized and you buff into it, it'll turn your pad that color as it removes the oxidation. And if you go from that dark oxidized area you're buffing, bring that into a white fiberglass area, a lot of times you'll get a transfer of that color from the oxidation that is now on your pad. So you always want to watch out for that. I did end up buffing this glass that's got kind of a black border on it right there, and that border is like a plastic or something. And so where it's black, it oxidizes. And fortunately, in this case, when I did that, I was able to clean my pad with a towel prior to going back to the white fiberglass, and I didn't have any of that transfer issue. But just a note for you, if you're doing dark colors, good idea to pay attention. And obviously, you don't want to bring oxidized color into a white gel coat, because then it's just another step to get it back out. All right, and here I'm just going back through and wiping off all the areas that I've waxed. One of the things you might notice, or hopefully you'll notice in my videos, is whenever I'm wiping or removing the wax that's been buffed on, I've always got a really tightly and well folded towel, or I try to anyways, for a couple reasons. One, you want that thickness of the towel folded to help get a good consistent pressure on the wax you're trying to wipe back off. And then two, I always like it really nicely folded, so I've got an edge that can be used to push up against edges and really get full contact. Probably almost unanimously, every person I've trained, or seemingly every person I've trained through the years, they'll grab a towel and they'll just kind of throw it up on the surface and start wiping. And I've just found that it really makes a lot of sense to keep a really nicely folded towel. And, if you've never done this, you're hearing me say this going, yeah, right. It doesn't matter. Well, trust me, it really does. I like to have at least 3 to 4 folds in my towel to give it that thickness, but then also just a nice, crisp, sharp edge. It really helps when wiping out areas, again, where there's 2 joining surfaces, where maybe the fiberglass ends and the wood begins, or the fiberglass has a line, like in this area where Jeremy's got this gold stripe. That's actually an indent down the side of the hull. It also helps when you're going around window edges. Helps really key point is that it helps when you're trying to remove wax from the bottom or waterline area if the boat's in the water. If you've got a towel like Jeremy's is right there, in fact, it's just all loose and kind of floppy all over. If he goes down near the waterline right now, I can almost guarantee that towel's coming back up wet, because it's just kind of hanging and dangling out of his hand. So if I was doing that, I would have had a nice rectangular shape to my towel. And when I went across the bottom waterline area, which he may not have went all the way down to, and that's why it didn't matter for him. But if he had, that nice crisp sharp line on the towel will be really easy to get down to the bottom of the waterline, and then controlling the rest of your towel so it's not just hanging out all over. Really helps keep it dry and helps keep you working, because once that towel's wet, it's time to grab a new one. You're not going to get anywhere with a wet towel. So you'll notice here Jeremy's kind of one-handing this orbital, and this is definitely a different take on it. He's got it so the barrel or the back end is pointing away, and really you can do anything you want with the orbital as long as it's comfortable in your hand and it's getting good contact. You can flip it any which way. The key is you want to see that the head is continuing to rotate for sure, because if the head gets to where it's not real flat, or if you've got too heavy of oxidation or the wrong speed or whatever, that head will not spin. It'll just kind of vibrate and get locked up. So as long as the head is spinning and you're keeping it relatively flat, it really doesn't matter what direction you're pointing the back end of the machine. All right, so thinking about speed, typically when we're running an orbital polisher in this type of a pad, we like to run it anywhere from about a 3.5 to a 5 on the dial setting. The dial goes all the way up to 6, but if you run a 5 or a 6 with this type of pad, basically it's going to overheat the glue and tear up your pad pretty quick. Also, with what I was talking about a minute ago as far as making sure that the head is spinning, for some reason it seems like if you're up on a 5 or a 6, sometimes it'll not spin as well, and I'm not sure exactly what that's all about, but it just seems to be the case. So generally we're about a 3.5 to 5. I think on this boat, because it was in relatively good shape, we were probably running a 3.5 on the dial. All right, in this section, I'm just going to tell Jeremy that to get that edge right there, the best way to do it is to start from below that area and kind of roll over that edge so you can see where the buffer is stopping. Especially because we're using an orbital polisher, that's the best way to get up into that line. If it was a rotary polisher, you could do it carefully just by setting it on that edge and working it. But with an orbital, it's important to know where the true edge of the machine is getting to, as opposed to the edge that it appears to get to. And that may or may not make sense to you, but basically the orbital polisher does not run a perfect circle. It runs oblong circles because it's got a weight in there that kicks it out of a circle into an orbit. So hopefully that makes sense. If you've worked any of those tight edges, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about.